Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. Welcome to this OCM held for the Shire of Serpentine Jarrahdale on Monday, the 18th of July 2022. I declare this meeting open at 7 p.m. I will also acknowledge that this meeting is being held on the traditional land of the Noongar people, and we pay our respects to the elders past, present and emerging. I also wish to advise members of the public gallery that this meeting is being audio recorded in accordance with council policy. If you are asking a public question or making a statement or deputation to the meeting, this will be audio recorded. Members of the public are reminded that no other visual or audio recording of this meeting by any other means is allowed. Move to item 1, which is attendances and apologies. We have one leave of absence this evening, which is from Councillor Dean Straughtons. Move to item 2, public question time. Item 2.1 is response to previous public questions taken on notice. There is one from the previous ordinary council meeting held on the 20th of June 2022, which is published in the agenda and will be published in the minutes of this meeting. Item 2.2 is public questions. Can I please ask Mr. Bill Denham to come forward and ask your questions this evening?
Councillors, officers. 2 quick ones. The Mundijong Oval football shelters were a budgeted item approximately 3 years ago. They're still not done. Just wondering when the new ones will be installed and operational.
I'll ask the Director of Infrastructure Services to respond to your first question this evening, please.
Through you, Madam President. Thank you for the question. The new shelters for Mundijong Oval were ordered on 16th of February 2022. Advice was received from the manufacturer regarding the need to change specification and type of construction material on 25 May. Certification of new design was obtained on 15th of June, and new purchase order was issued to the manufacturer on 16th of June. The contractor has advised that shelters will be installed in September.
Okay, that's okay. Second question, what is the total pool of money for the latest small community grants round? Who and how much went to each of the successful applicants, i.e. Central's Junior Football Club received $2,200?
I'll ask the Deputy CEO.
Thank you, through the chair. Thank you for your question, Mr. Denham. So in 2021-2022 financial year, the total funds that were available to be provided through the general grant scheme was $39,200. The general grants are delivered in 3 rounds in July, October and February annually. In the February 2022 round, there were 6 applications, 5 of which were eligible under the funding program. There was $9,797 available for the round. Recipients of the funding were, and so these amounts are all excluding GST, Serpentine Jarrahdale Adult Riders Club received $2,337.35. Mundijong Central's Junior Football Club Inc. received $2,200. Jarrahdale Community Collective received $1,850. Heritage Country Choir received $1,943. And Serpentine Jarrahdale Men's Shed received $1,427.40. The total amount requested from the 5 eligible applications was $13,349.84, and the total provided in funding was $9,757.75. An effort was made to support each eligible and equally as important project, and given the competitive nature of the funding program, none of the applications received the full amount requested. The community funding policy states that the grant applications are subject to a competitive process and the availability of budget allocations, and the general grants guidelines clearly state that uniforms will not be funded. However, in the case of the application from Mundijong Central Juniors Football Club, given the unique nature and intent of the initiative, the application was supported.
Well, thanks.
Thank you, Mr. Denham. Could I please ask Mr. Garth Mountsie to come forward and ask your questions, please?
Councillors. On this evening's agenda, item 10.1.4, requesting an extend date for completion of the solar farm on Rice and Peverett roads, I note that there is to be trees planted as a screening that are to be a minimum of 5 metres high at full growth. Can I please have reassurance from the Shire that this vegetation screening corridor on all boundaries will have suitable lower bush coverage to screen from ground level to the required 5 metres and not just consist of a tree canopy at 5 metres?
I'll ask the Director of Development Services to respond to your question this evening, please.
Thank you for the question, Mr. Mountsie, and through you, Madam President. So the decision of the solar farm was made by the Development Assessment Panel in 2016, and it imposed a number of conditions and advice notes. Condition 9, and I'll read out Condition 9, states, prior to the commencement of works, a landscaping/revegetation plan, which includes mature vegetation along the perimeter of the development site for the purposes of screening and privacy of nearby affected residences, shall be submitted to and approved by the Shire of Serpentine Jarrahdale. The decision of the Development Assessment Panel then went on to add an advice note, and that advice note states, in relation to Condition 9, mature vegetation means initial tree planting shall have a height of 2 metres and shall grow to a full height of no less than 5 metres. The trees shall not be pruned to a height less than 5 metres. So in response to your question and the condition and the advice note, officers note that Condition 9 does require a landscape/revegetation plan, which includes, but is not limited to, mature vegetation, with this defined by the advice note. Officers take the view that the condition requires a plan to demonstrate screening and privacy of affected residences. This would, based on the condition, need to consider medium and ground story planting to also complement the upper story screening provided by trees. I just add the caveat, the Shire will need to assess this once a plan is submitted by an applicant. So this approach is consistent with the Shire's usual assessment of landscape and revegetation plans, which looks at the 3 separate stories of screening. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you. Could I please ask Mrs. Lee Bond to come forward and ask your questions this evening?
What was the individual cost for the following items regarding the breakfast held on the 30th of June this year? White chairs and how many? Tablecloths, food, coffee van, and why wouldn't you use the council chairs? There was more than required available. What was the full cost of the mobile library bus and the cost to outfit it and the yearly operational cost of this bus?
I'll ask the Chief Executive Officer to respond to the first part of your question 1 this evening. Thank you.
Thanks, Madam President, and thanks, Mrs. Bond, for the question. In regards to your question on costs for the breakfast, I'm happy to advise the following. 100 chairs and 20 tablecloths were hired from the same company at a total cost of $602, including GST. This comprised of $212.50 for the chairs, $229.50 for tablecloths, and $160 delivery fee. Cost for the food was $1,285, including GST. The coffee van cost was $595, including GST. Chairs were hired as the Shire doesn't have 100 matching chairs in the administration building that could have been used.
I'll ask the Deputy CEO, Director of Community and Organisational Development Services to respond to the second part of your first question this evening. Thank you.
Thank you, through the chair. Thank you for the question, Mrs. Bond. In 2021-2022 financial year, the budget for the purchase and fit out of the mobile library van was $77,000. In the 2022-2023 draft budget, the running cost, excluding depreciation, are $11,495, and the associated employee costs to deliver the service is approximately $70,000.
Were business in particular invited to the breakfast held on the 30th of June this year? And if so, how was this deemed? Who would be invited? Why wasn't this meeting recorded? And how many ratepayers attended?
I'll ask the Chief Executive Officer to respond to your second question this evening. Thank you.
Thanks for the question. The event was open to anyone to attend. The Shire promoted the event through various channels, including Facebook, and invites to the local community groups, businesses, and stakeholders. The breakfast was not recorded as officers never considered recording the event, to be honest. Prior to the event, the Shire had received 85 RSVPs. The breakfast was informal, so we didn't ask people attending if they were ratepayers. However, at one point in the event, officers counted over 65 people in attendance.
You just said we didn't have 100 chairs here that we could have used instead of hiring them.
That's right.
Explain carefully and fully what category of ratepayer was sent a notification of change of rating category dated the 29th of June this year, advising the ratepayers that their new rating category will apply as of the 1st of July this year.
I'll ask the Director of Corporate Services to respond to your third question this evening, Mrs. Bond.
Thank you, Madam President. Good evening, Mrs. Bond. In the 21-22 budget, Council reintroduced the unimproved value rural residential differential rating category. Approximately 100 properties less than 4,000 square metres were excluded from this category in error. These properties were advised of the change of rating category in a letter dated 29 June 2022. It is proposed that these 100 properties will now be included in the unimproved value rural residential differential rating category in the 22-23 budget.
Under the Local Government Act, local governments are to allow 15 minutes for public question time at each meeting. As we have not reached the 15-minute mark this evening, is there any questions from the floor? Mrs. Bond? Mrs. Bond, could you please come up to the lectern so that you are able to be heard?
Where is the pavement on Rowley Road requiring repairs? How many progress payments are there and what is the total? And explain what claim 1 on the 22nd of May this year is for on Rowley Road.
Mrs. Bond, we'll take that question on notice. Are you able to provide it to the officers in writing, please?
Right here.
Thank you. Is there any further questions from the floor? Public question time concludes at 7:14 p.m. Item 3 is public statement time. Could I please ask Mr. Gareth Munski from Oakford to come forward and read your statement, please?
Again, my statement again is in relation to item 10.1.4. As an adjoining landowner, I am and will be very affected by this proposal. This matter has now been dragging on for many, many years and has not made any progress whatsoever. In December 2016, the JDAP approved this development, but they agreed to a number of very important conditions. My understanding is that this proposal is only to change one of those conditions, that is the time period for construction. It was an express condition in the 2016 approval that the construction had to be completed by December 2018. In due course, nothing happened, and the Shire in December 2018, without consultation or discussion with the public, extended this time period for a further 2 years. Then, in March 2020, Minister Sapiotti extended all development approvals for a further 2 years again due to COVID. Now here we are heading towards December 2022, and they've had 6 years to start this project, and there has been no commencement whatsoever. I would ask the Shire not to approve this further time extension as it is. This company has had plenty of time to do the project, and there hasn't been one thing that has started on the land. As an affected neighbour, we don't want this project dragging on, as it gives us, as ratepayers who are impacted, great uncertainty. I challenge, and I ask you to challenge, the statement on page 44. This proposal remains generally consistent with the planning framework. As noted on page 43, one of the key objectives of LPS 3 is to protect large rural lots. I would ask you to consider option 2. As an alternative, if you do believe that this proposal is consistent with good planning, then please do not accept the wording as proposed by the officers. The officers are recommending that the words, "The solar farm shall be fully constructed in accordance with approved plans within a period of 2 years from the commencement of construction." What does that mean? Does it mean there is no date on when they have to commence construction? Do they have to give notice of completion of construction? The wording is very vague and very unclear, and this will continue the uncertainty for ratepayers. At a minimum, this wording needs to be tightened up. Perhaps some wording inking the 2 years of construction completion to December 22 due date. Wording along the lines may be more suitable. The solar farm shall be fully constructed in accordance with the approved plans within a period of 2 years from the date. Notice of commencement of construction is received from the proponent, which must be no later than the 13th of December 2022. Thank you.
Thank you. Can I please ask Mr. Bill Denham to come forward and read your statement this evening?
This year, a local boy, Jerome Miller, won the 2022 WA Football Commission Indigenous Jumper Design Competition. To celebrate this achievement, the Central's Junior Football Club applied for a $4,900 grant in the latest community grants round. Purchased 3 sets of these award-winning jumpers could be unveiled during the opening game of the Nadoc round. Central's Junior is a club with approximately 700 children run completely by volunteers. Unfortunately, due to a large amount of applications, we were only granted 2,200. This enabled us to purchase only 1 complete set of jumpers. Maybe Council needs to look at increasing the total amount in the grants pool to meet the ever-increasing applications and needs from these valuable volunteer community groups. Thanks.
Thank you, Mr. Denham. Can I please ask Mrs. Lee Bond to come forward and read your statement this evening?
What justification does this Shire have for increasing the rates? Absolutely none. You have mismanaged way too much ratepayers' money and government funding for way too long. And that is me being polite using the word mismanaged. I am disturbed to find that information I have in writing you seem to have no record of, and both this and other written information leaves me in no doubt you don't need to be an accountant or even much good at maths. The invalidity complaint regarding the Shire was brought up by a candidate at the last elections. The Shire jumped on the bandwagon after the event, so stop claiming it was your idea. That is false and misleading, and you sealed your claim status in the minutes. How very clever. OCM, 10th of November 2014. Public questions. Ms. Michelle Rich. I read with great interest the minutes of Ordinary Council meeting 13th of October 2014 In regards to the item 12, councillor questions of which notice has been given and the article on page 3 of the Serpentine Jarrahdale Examiner dated 23rd of October 2014. I find it hard to believe that simple questions have not been answered and that elected councillors choose to operate in a non-transparent way. Really?
Thank you, Mrs. Bond. Public statement time is concluded at 7:20 p.m. Item number 4 is petitions and deputations. Could I please ask Mr. Henry Dykstra and Harley Dykstra regarding item 10.1.4, amendment to condition to extend date which completion of development must be achieved, to please come forward and read your deputation.
Thank you, Madam President. Good evening, councillors. I'm Henry Dykstra from Harley Dykstra. I have with me Richard Harris and Kyle Jackson. They're both directors of Westgen, who are the owners of the proposed Byford solar farm. I'd hope to make some introductory remarks, first of all, about the project status and about the planning approval, and then I'll ask for Richard and or Kyle to add some updated information on progress of the project. Councillors, Westgen is committed to taking the Byford solar farm project through to financing construction with an anticipated commencement of works of October to November this year for commencement. The project has undergone delays, and that's mainly due to changes in the federal government policies that have been made, and that's made financing somewhat difficult. The investment environment for renewables has changed substantially, however, in the last 12 months, and with the new federal government commitment to a legislated 43% reduction in CO2 emissions on the 2005 levels by 2030, that now gives investors the confidence to fund projects like the Byford solar farm. In Western Australia, the state government's announcement of retirement of all state-owned coal-fired power stations by 2029 makes the project very attractive for investors. So Byford ticks all the boxes for government's distributed energy roadmap, supplying renewable power for local communities and replacing coal-fired generation. The delays in the project have actually made it more robust economically and technologically, and have future-proofed the project as it now has improved battery storage and more efficient panels. The project is substantially underwritten by a contract with Wesfarmers and Clean Heat to buy all power from the plant. We have reviewed the agenda item that's before you this evening, and we support the officer's recommendation, and that is to allow the minor change wording to the condition 21. We also agree with the officer's report that amending the condition to the existing approval doesn't alter its intent. Before handing over to Kyle and or Richard, I'd like to make two further observations that arose when I read the agenda report for this evening. Firstly, if the closure of Rice Road were to occur as a result of interfacing government project, there are suitable alternatives for accessing the solar farm, and these can easily be accommodated either during the detailed design and construction phase or even after construction in future if required. We don't see that as an obstacle. The second point I'd make is that this request really relates to amending one condition on a valid planning approval, condition that relates only to timing. But there's no need to reassess the merits of the proposal as such, as the applicant is not seeking a new planning approval at this time. They already have a planning approval. The councillors, with that, I'll hand over to Richard or Kyle, and they'll give some further information on the progress of the project and some of its benefits, and then we're happy to answer questions either now or the agenda item.
Thank you.
Thank you, Henry, and Madam President and councillors. Firstly, I'd like to say we've valued the support of the council, the Shire, since we commenced this project quite a number of years ago. As Henry said, as WestGen, as developer of the project, we are committed to taking the project through to financial close and constructing the solar farm. We are conscious that there's been delays, and the project, having come through those delays, is actually now probably a better project financially and commercially than the one we originally designed. It now has battery storage, which allows it to produce electricity when the sun isn't shining. And this is a feature which is very attractive for the grid at the moment and for Western Power and the market generally. Our customer to buy electricity, Wesfarmers Cleaning, as Henry said, has signed a contract to buy all the power from the plant, which again helps us to finance the project, because it's now fully underwritten, in a sense, by Wesfarmers Clean Heat. Just a few quick updates. We haven't been doing nothing in the period since we first got approval. As I said, we've signed that contract for the supply of power to Wesfarmers Clean Heat. We have a network connection agreement with Western Power, which takes the power from the project site to Byford substation. It'll be underground cable along Thomas Road, along the northern side of Thomas Road, in the road reserve. We've signed a contract, EPC contract with NZAN, which is a global engineering and construction company, who will take responsibility for the construction, the purchase of equipment, and the warrant. They will warrant the output of the plant. We've done all the design and engineering that is required for the plant, which enables it to produce the output that is required by Wesfarmers Clean Heat. And we have agreements to purchase the land, which is one private block of land, but the main part of it is owned by Western Power, and we will purchase the land prior to construction. Financing, and maybe I'll talk a little bit more about the financing, which has been challenging, to say the least, but I think we're now on a path to get to the final stage of financing the project. We will be part of what's going to be a large solar investment fund that will not only fund Byford, but fund other solar farms around Australia. The fund has grown because of the change in, and as Henry said, the change in the financial climate, or the investment climate, the climate for investing in renewable energy. And the change, as Henry said, the change of government federally to commit to reducing CO2 emissions gives certainty to investors wanting to invest in the solar farm. Thank you.
Madam President, conscious of time, I think Richard and Henry have covered most things. In terms, just wanted to address a comment before around the joining neighbour around the vegetation and the screening, and that's something that we'd definitely be happy to consider and agree to having some lower and mid-story vegetation in there. Happy to answer any questions.
Thank you. Can I please ask Mr. Neil Teode from Dynamic Planning and Developments and Len Kosover from LK Advisory regarding item 10.1.9, proposed Metropolitan Region Scheme Amendment, West Mundijong Urban Precinct, request for preliminary comment, to please come forward.
Thank you, Madam President, councillors, CEO and Shire staff. My name is Len Kosover from LK Advisory, and I'd like to thank you for receiving this deputation in support of the officer report and recommendation regarding item 10.1.9 on the proposed MRS amendment for the West Mundijong Urban Precinct. As Madam President rightly said, the deputation was intended to be provided both by Neil Theo and myself, but In light of your busy agenda this evening and time constraints, I'm speaking solely. The deputation will only be brief, and as I mentioned, I'm joined by Neil Teo from Dynamic Planning and Developments, and together we represent the landowner group leading this MRS amendment proposal. We'd like to acknowledge and thank the Shire's Planning Director, Mr. Andrew Trossick, and his team for their considered and comprehensive report to Council on this proposal, which recognises the strategic opportunity that this proposal presents to shape a broader regional planning solution and contribute to the Shire's long-term economic, employment, population and infrastructure objectives. The Administration's report rightly recognises the timely convergence in the Shire of once-in-a-generation initiatives, investment and infrastructure, comprising new and upgraded road access, including the extension of Tonkin Highway and the east-west freight corridor servicing Westport, new deepwater harbour to the west of the Shire, new industrial, intermodal, enterprise and employment opportunities, and new tourism and economic potential. The proposed West Mundijong Urban Precinct represents both a catalyst and a key opportunity for unlocking all of this potential. As I said, the deputation will be very brief, and with that, I'd like to again thank the Shire staff for their report and respectfully commend their recommendation to Council. Thank you for your time, Madam President.
Thank you. Can I please ask Captain Scott Jones, Serpentine Volunteer Bushfire Brigade, and Captain Chris Burgess, Keysbrook Volunteer Bushfire Brigade, Chairperson Bushfire Advisory Committee regarding item 10.1.10, consideration of proposed advocacy position on arrangements for management of volunteer bushfire brigades, Western Australian Local Government Association, to come forward and present their deputation this evening.
Thank you very much, Madam President, to Shire councillors and staff. This deputation is made in relation to agenda item 10.1.10, titled Consideration of Proposed Advocacy Position on the Arrangements for the Management of Volunteer Bushfire Brigades of Western Australia Local Government Association during tonight's OCM. This deputation is submitted for consideration by Council in response to the options presented in the aforementioned report, with an alternative option submitted as part of this deputation. This deputation is made on behalf of a delegated captains group, which consists of 6 of the 7 volunteer bushfire brigade captains in the Shire of Serpentine Jarrahdale, in response to the officers' report. These brigades consist of Keysbrook, Serpentine, Mundijong, Jarrahdale, Byford and the Emergency Support Brigade, which consists of approximately 350 volunteers from our local community and are directly responsible for the primary operational response to fire incidents, being 85% of the Shire of Serpentine Jarrahdale. This deputation is presented this evening firstly by myself, Scott Jones, the Captain of the Serpentine Volunteer Brigade, and Mr Chris Burgess, the Captain of the Keysbrook Brigade and the current Chair of the Shire's Bushfire Advisory Committee, both of which have been appointed by the Captains Group to present on his behalf. I'm also joined in the gallery this evening by Mr Nathan Howling, the Captain of the Mundijong Brigade, Mr Jessica Gibson, the Captain of the Byford Volunteer Brigade, and Mr Nathan Carroll, the Captain of the Serpentine Jarrahdale Emergency Support Brigade, also mentioned in the deputation. And this is also supported by Sarah Davis, the Captain of the Jarrahdale Volunteer Bushfire Brigade, who was unfortunately unable to join us this evening. In making this deputation, the following information is presented to Council to assist to inform Council in its decision-making process this evening. This deputation has been submitted as allowed, distributed as allowed under the Shire of Serpentine Jarrahdale standing orders to councillors, and I'd like to thank those councillors that did respond to that deputation.
I just want to talk about the Walga paper option. So there was 4 options identified in the future management of bushfire brigades, as outlined in the officer's report that's in your agenda tonight. First one's the status quo, being the continued of the current arrangements where bushfire brigades are managed by the majority of local governments and a transfer arrangement negotiated on an ad hoc basis between that local government and DFES. The second one is the improvements, so continue with the current arrangements for local government managing bushfire brigades with additional support provided by state government in respect to increased funding and better access to resourcing and training. Third option, a hybrid model. Local government continues to manage bushfire brigades where they have the capacity, capability and resources to do so. And however, where they do not have this capacity, capability, resource, the responsibility of management is transferred to DFIRST. And the fourth option is a transfer, where the responsibility of management of all bushfire brigades is transferred to state government, consistent with arrangements in other states and territories. In relation to option 4, this implies under the current arrangements in Western Australia, a handover to the responsibility of DFIRST, noting that there's no commitment has been made under any government to stand up a rural fire service, either part or separate of DFIRST. This assumption also forms the basis of the consultation process with the brigades, and any insinuation that this assumption basis is incorrect and would constitute an inaccurate basis for engagement with our brigades. At no point in the consultation process was any alternative model other than the 4 options outlined in the WOLGA document mentioned or discussed with the captains, and the officer's recommendation in tonight's OCM is the first time that's this been communicated to brigades as a preferred option. On the 10th of June 2022, the brigade captains were first made aware of the advocacy paper, initially by phone call and then a follow-up email to all the captains from the Shire's Chief Bushfire Control Officer. This email also contained a link to a survey which was put together by the Shire in relation to which the results will be included in tonight's report by the Shire Officer. Due to the requirement to provide a response by the 26th of June, which was 16 days from the first notification to the brigade captains group, the captains engaged with their members via various means, given the volunteer nature of the organisations that we're part of and the other personal commitments of our members. This included email, Teams meetings and discussions and face-to-face meetings with no consistent application or engagement method available due to the time frame. Feedback from these sessions were provided to the Shire's officer at the captain's meeting on the 26th of June. In relation to the survey, this was distributed to members with a short time frame and little context to provide to those members. Many questions were asked during the process that the captains could not answer. These would be a direct reason for the lack of responses received from the Shire's 350 plus volunteer brigade members, and the survey results represent less than 15% response rate. In the 7th of July edition of the Farm Weekly newspaper, an article was published on pages 5 to 7 titled "Volleys Say No. Bushfire volunteers are rallying against suggestions that they be absorbed by DFIRST." In this article, a DFIRST statement is made, and I quote, "The department, DFIRST, will only consider such an arrangement, i.e. a handover, when that has the full support of local firefighters and the broader community." This deputation would like to point out that the recommended and alternative options presented in the office report this evening does not have the support of the local firefighters, either by the results of the survey or the feedback from the captain's meeting, nor has the broader community been engaged. The output from brigade captain's meeting and discussions. Brigade captains would like to acknowledge the attendance of the Shire officer at our captain's meeting and acknowledges the multiple references in the officer's report that the option presenters do not align with those recommended or selected by 6 of the 7 brigades captains representing the brigades in the Shire. In addition to the references made in the Shire officer's report, the below information has not been included, but it's important for Council to consider in this matter this evening. Some of which was raised in the captain's meeting, and some would have been raised if a more comprehensive consultation process was undertaken. First one, during the Shire of Serpentine Jarrahdale's BFAT, Bushfire Advisory Committee meeting on the 26th of May, the minutes which were presented to councillors at the June OCM, the following statement was made, quote, "The same officer submitting this agenda item at tonight's OCM stated that based on the facilities strategic plan, the Shire has a long-term action identified in writing in the document, 20-year plan, as follows. A review of the rural-urban interface over the next 8 years with the growth of Byford and the surrounding areas. A strategic review of brigade activity before the end of this decade and recommends an assessment of the new facility, including location." This does not mention closing down. Also, the officer added that the advocacy to secure a career fire station in the Shire is a response to the need for combating structure fire, hazardous fire, industry and business fires and serious traffic accidents. This has not been advocated to replace combating the bushfire risk, which is the purpose of established bushfire brigades in the Shire. This clearly articulates the importance of retaining our established bushfire brigades in the Shire. During the same BFAC meeting, the Shire President commented, as minuted, we quote, the Shire, having a plan and being ready to act, puts the Shire in a positive position to demonstrate why its proposal should be funded. This demonstrates that despite the officer's recommendation, this recommendation goes against the current work the Shire has been doing in recent years in emergency management, e.g. the SESM program, the Oakley Station rebuild, the 20-year facility plan, the WHS project officer mentioned. The adoption of the officer's recommendation is not only not a vulgar proposal, but has the potential to lead to a weakened response threat for the Shire due to a potential decrease in resourcing that currently exists. The reason for this weakened response is due to potential amalgamations of brigades, i.e. we then have less appliances available, and a non-guarantee relating to the resourcing of a rural fire service model by the state government, i.e. the state government does not have resources available in current or forecasted future budgets to not only maintain the current BFF capability in the state, but to enhance it. It should be noted that if a rural fire service model is progressed, the Shire will still be accountable for the preparation and recovery efforts, much of which is currently undertaken by the brigades, which will no longer have access to, including undertaking community burn programs and the issuing of fire permits by fire control officers. There are currently minimum training standards and operational procedures in place for local governments to adopt relating to WHS obligations. These can always be reviewed and enhanced in design, and this was explicitly discussed at the June Cabinet meeting, and all are in agreement with moving this forward. In addition, under a DFS model, significant local knowledge and experience would be lost due to the removal of the volunteer SEO structure. That's currently in place, with the Shire having approximately 15 in this position, we would lose this rank, falling back into brigade structures under a captain. Finally, the high incident numbers in the officer's report are also due to better coordination and using more brigades at incidents to make incidents shorter for the Shire to manage, i.e. lowering the risk to the Shire by the use of more resources, rather than having a prolonged incident with fewer brigades involved. This means it's not necessarily more incidents in the Shire, but rather using more brigades to manage these, reducing the rate of escalation and duration. This is a distinct advantage of the Shire retaining the current structure as felt by the brigade captains, and this coordination leads to a community of brigades to combat fires across the Shire, not 7 individual brigades.
This deputation submits that the options presented by the Council's officer report are not aligned and result in a movement by the Shire by default to select option 4 of the Wonga paper, irrespective of the decision that is made by Council on both options presented tonight. The officer recommendation, which is option 1, is not one of the options presented by the Wonga paper, as previously identified, and was not explicitly consulted with the community, brigades or brigade captains. Should Council support this option, this not only contradicts the collective view of the brigades, but is considered an invalid response, given this assumes government has already implemented plans to establish a separate rural fire service. And therefore, the officer's recommendation number 2 is the only option that aligns with the options presented in the Wonga paper, but is not unanimously supported by the brigades. In reading the officer's report, there is a very strong perceived bias that the decision has already been made by Shire officers and Council to hand over the Shire's brigades, without presenting an option to Council tonight that retains the brigades under local government control. This not only goes against the consultation, albeit, as previously mentioned, inadequate, with the brigades of the community. This deputation seeks to present an option tonight for Shire consideration, for Council consideration to retain the brigades. Noting the aforementioned information, an option to be considered by Council tonight, as recommended by this deputation, is that the deputation recommends that Council consider the following. The Council does not support the officer's recommendation of option 1. The Council does not support the alternative option 2, and that Council seek an alternative motion in line with this deputation, and that is recommends that Western Australian Local Government Association advocate for the following position. That is, support option 2 of Wonga's paper, continue with the current arrangements for local government management of brigades with additional support provided by the state government with respect to increased funding and better access to training resources. Request that the Shire President write to the Minister of Emergency Services advocating for continued engagement with the local government sector in the reform of the Bushfires Act. And third, request the CEO convene a special working group of Shire officers, the Chief Bushfire Control Officer and Brigade Captains to develop an enhancement strategy plan for the next 5 years to be presented by BFAC in November and to the Ordinary Council meeting in December 2023.
This deputation does not agree with the conclusion statement set out in the officer's report. This does not align with the advocated position of the Volga document, nor the collective views of the Shire's volunteer brigades. The latter is of significant concern. Financial implication comment. The justification of increased insurance costs is not valid. Costs are increasing all round. The local government should be reaching out for additional funding for the ESL to treat this, the same way as increasing costs for other operational expenses. This is not isolated to brigades, but operations of the Shire as a whole. Risk implications. In response to the risk assessment statement in the officer's recommendation being this option is considered the lowest strategic risk option, this deputation would like to offer the following against the key areas of the Shire Strategic Community Plan. Strategy 1.3.3, Enhanced Community Safety. Officer's recommendation does not align. Without a full assessment of the associated impacts of supporting the recommendation, including significant reduction of volunteers and amalgamations, it is possible the reduction in community safety will result. Deputation recommendation supports this strategy by increased enhancements, operating procedures and compliance to WHS legislation. Strategy 4.1.1, provide efficient, effective, innovative, professional management of Shire operations to deliver the best outcome for the community. Officer recommendation does not align. The provision of Shire managed brigades does this. In supporting the officer's recommendation, this implies that the Shire managed brigades are not innovative, professional, efficient, effective or efficient. Deputation recommendation supports this strategy. The collective management and strategic ability of the volunteer managers, leaders within the brigades enhances the ability of the local government, not just in fire response, but overall community safety and compliance. Strategy 4.1.2, maximise Shire's brand and reputation in the community. Officer's recommendation does not align. The act of handing over without alignment with the brigade's view or community consultation does not support the strategy. Deputation recommendation supports this strategy in supporting the community-based volunteer brand under the Shire's control. Strategy 4.2.1, build and promote strategic relationships in the Shire's interest. Officer's recommendation does not align. Should Council support the officer's recommendation, this will result in a fractured relationship between the Shire and brigades, especially for any transition period. Deputation recommendation supports this strategy by strengthening the working relationship between the brigades and Shire officers. Strategy 4.2.2, ensure appropriate long-term strategic and operational planning is undertaken and considered when making decisions. Officer's recommendation does not align. Given this matter has only been elevated for about approximately 6 weeks, since the paper release, insufficient planning has been undertaken. Deputation recommendation supports the strategy with the increased consultation as per deputation recommendation. Strategy 4.2.3, provide clear strategic direction to the administration. Does not align, and this links back to my comment in 4.2.2, deputation recommendation, same thing mentioned in 4.2.2.
I won't go over the alternative recommendation again, it's been distributed and I've mentioned that before, but just as a closing statement, I want to thank you all for the opportunity to be able to present this deputation to you this evening, and we hope the Council consider the effort, the time, the dedication that those attending tonight to represent the brigades, and I note the significant number of people in the public gallery that have contributed to and put this deputation together, noting the volunteer nature of our roles in our own time, away from our families and other commitments in a short time frame, which is wholeheartedly in the best interest of our community. And I would implore Council to strongly consider this deputation with the importance that it deserves. Thank you.
Thank you. Item 5 is the President's Report. Good evening and welcome to the Ordinary Council meeting for July 2022. I'm excited to announce that the Serpentine Jarrahdale Library Service will open the doors to its new home in Byford tomorrow morning. The new location, which is formerly the Byford Hall building, has been transformed into a modern contemporary library. Shire staff from across the organisation have worked tremendously hard over many months in supporting the refurbishment project and library move. On behalf of the council, I would like to congratulate and thank them for their tireless efforts. I would also like to acknowledge the funding provided by the Australian Government through their Local Roads and Community Infrastructure Grants program, which made the refurbishment works possible. Finally, on our library service, it is great to see our new mobile library service commence last week, which provides an important weekly outreach service to our communities in the southern suburbs of the Shire. Moving on to other matters, I would like to thank all residents who attended our community information breakfast on the 30th of June. The breakfast was a great opportunity to hear from our community about the 2022-23 budget, and it was pleasing to see so many locals actively engaged in our rates and budget setting process. The positive feedback from those who attended the breakfast has been fantastic, and given the success of this breakfast, we will continue to find ways to communicate with our community in a positive way. A special council meeting will be held next Monday, the 25th of July, for consideration of our 2022-23 budget. There has been plenty happening in our community over the past month, including the celebration of Jarrahdale's 150th anniversary since its establishment. Jarrahdale is a town filled with rich history, and it was great to join with our local community at the high tea event and hear about the people and events which has helped shape its history. Congratulations to all involved in a successful celebration. I was also happy to catch up with the Darling Downs Residents Association for the official opening of the Darling Downs Equestrian Park's new day yards. The Shire helped fund the installation of the day yards through its 2020-21 infrastructure fund, and it was great to see this new asset for our equine community come to fruition. That same day, I attended the old Serpentine Bridge School for the unveiling of its new disability access upgrades. Funding by a state government grant, the upgrades have seen the installation of a disability access ramp, as well as the addition of a new step into the building. The school was a big part in many of our residents' childhoods, and ensuring it is accessible to everyone aligns with the Shire's vision to create a more inclusive community. Lastly, I would like to end tonight's report by acknowledging the wonderful Nadoc Week celebrations that took place around our Shire earlier this month. It was great to attend the Mundijong Central's Junior Football Club Nadoc Week ceremony, which include the presentation of special jumpers designed by one of their own young stars, Jerome. The Shire also celebrated Nadoc Week with a cultural walking tour of Serpentine Falls, a special themed movie night and a youth showcase event. Congratulations to everyone involved in helping make Nadoc Week prominent across our entire Shire. As always, my full calendar can be viewed in the following pages. Item 6 is declaration of councillors and officers' interests. Councillor Michael D'Agostino has declared a proximatory interest in item 10.1.4, amendment to condition to extend date which completion of development must be achieved, no use listed solar farm, incident tourist facility, office and site facility at lot 1001 25 Privet Lane, lot 200 1674 Thomas Road and lot 210 Abernethy Road, Oakford. The nature of Councillor D'Agostino's interest is he is a neighbouring property owner. Councillor D'Agostino will leave the chambers while this item is discussed. Councillor Tricia Duggan declared an impartiality interest in item 10.1.9, proposed Metropolitan Region Scheme Amendment, West Mundijong Urban Precinct, request for primary comment. The nature of Councillor Duggan's interest is that Dr. Graham Ford refers to the radiology company Councillor Duggan works for. Dr. Ford is a property owner in the proposed development. The extent of the interest is no direct financial benefit. Shire President, Councillor Michelle Rich, declared an impartiality interest in item 10.2.2, procurement arrangement for natural resource management services. As Councillor Rich is a community board member of Landcare SJ, the extent of the interest is Councillor Rich is currently serving as a board member. Chief Executive Officer Mr Paul Martin declared a financial interest in item 10.4.5, consideration of rescheduling the CEO Employment Committee meeting from the 1st of August 2022 to the 8th of August 2022. As the CEO Employment Committee deals with the matters regarding the employment of the CEO. The extent of the interest is that Mr Martin is the CEO. Mr Martin will leave the chambers while this item is discussed. Item 7 is confirmation of minutes of previous council meetings. 7.1 is the ordinary council meeting minutes from the 20th of June 2022. Can I please have a mover for these minutes? Thank you, Councillor Duggan. Can I please have a seconder? Thank you, Councillor Bias. Is there anybody opposed to these minutes? Motion is carried unanimously. Item 8 is receipt of minutes or reports and consideration of adoption of recommendation from council meetings held since the previous council meeting, of which there is nil. I don't have them in my agenda. Oh, I haven't got an updated. No. Do it next time. Item 9 is motions of which notice has been given, of which there is one. Item 9.1, notice of motion, new freight and logistics link road option between Albany Highway, Southwest Highway and Forest Highway. Councillors would have this as a separate item. Can I please have a mover? I'm happy to move this motion. Can I have a seconder, please? Thank you, Councillor Atwell. Is there anybody opposed to this motion? Motion is carried unanimously. Item 10 is Chief Executive Officer reports. Item 10.1 is Development Services reports. Understanding Orders 2002, item 3.8, announcements by the person presiding without discussion. Item 1 is at any meeting of the council or a committee, the person presiding may announce or raise any matter of interest or relevance to the business of the council or committee, or propose the change to the order of business. I propose to change the order of the Development Services reports and bring item 10.1.10 to the front of the Development Services reports.
Madam President, can I propose an alternate motion then to that 10.1.10?
Yes, you can.
I would like to recommend the alternate motion as tabled in the deputation.
Do we have a seconder? Thank you, Councillor Duggan.
Can we just wait till we get that on the screen, Madam President? Councillor D'Agostino, for the benefit of the gallery, can I ask that you read it out so that we're all on the same page, please?
that, sorry. Oh, sorry. Yeah, actually, I'll read off. Oh, I probably should read off there, just make sure we're right. Sorry, I'll just wait for it to come up. That council recommends the Western Australian Local Government Association WALGA advocate for the following position. 1, support option 2 of the WALGA's arrangements for management of volunteer bushfire brigades. Proposed advocacy position paper being improvements continue with the current arrangements for local government management of PFBs, with additional support provided by the state government with respect to increased funding and better access to training resources and other support. 2, request the Shire President write to the Minister for Emergency Services advocating the continued engagement with the local government sector in the reform of the Bushfires Act of 1954. 3, request the CEO convene a special working group of Shire officers, the CBFCO and brigade captains to develop an enhancement strategy plan for the next 5 years to be presented via BFAC in November and to the OCM in December 2022.
Thank you, Councillor D'Agostino. Is there anybody opposed to this motion? I am opposed to this motion. Councillor D'Agostino, would you like to open debate, please?
Thanks, Madam President. I haven't been in council that long, but I must say that is probably one of the most impressive deputations I've ever seen, and I think it was very persuasive. Everything that I think was outlined made sense to me. I think the deputation is justifiable and should be supported, and I really can't add much to this persuasive presentation. You know, I think we should be supporting, and I strongly advocate we should be supporting our volunteers who do an amazing job, and I don't think I can add much to that.
Thank you, Councillor. Councillor Duggan, would you like to speak or reserve?
I'll speak. Thanks, Madam President. Further to what Michael has just, Councillor D'Agostino has just said, local government is called local government for a reason. We are to support our local communities and we are to support our local volunteers. There is no one that knows our area as well as our local volunteers and our local government, and I feel for that reason alone, we should be working together. Points 2 and 3 of the proposal sit at the base of everything that I've always said, and that is we need to have our communication with our residents down pat. So point 2, continued engagement with the local government sector. So that is in making sure that we have those channels of communication open, and so that there can be small changes as they're required so that it suits our local area. And of course, the third one, where we're talking about a working group where we can all actually get together and make sure that our local area is protected in the best way possible, and most importantly, that our volunteers are protected in the best way possible. Thanks.
Thank you, councillors. In speaking against this motion tonight, I know that I'm not going to be popular with the vast majority of the people sitting in the public gallery. A vast majority who the community and council and the Shire officers have a huge amount of respect for. Having been on council for a number of years, been Shire President for a number of years, I am privy, more so than my fellow councillors, to further information up the chain through other organisations and state government departments. The time frame allowed for communication with brigades on this is very limited. The time frame allowed for the Shire to make a response is very limited. It is not something that we've had a great deal of time to consider, but there has been a huge amount of work done in that short period of time to process everything that we do as a council, as a Shire, and what our emergency services do for our community. Just about every report that has come out of a major fire event in the last 15 to 20 years has made recommendations for a standalone brigade, a standalone service to actually take over the management of volunteer bushfire brigades. The most recent of those being the Ferguson report out of the Wooroloo Yarloop fire. Our volunteers don't just stay home and fight fires anymore. More often than not, they leave their local patches and they travel to other areas around the state or interstate. Given the changes made to the work health and safety laws that have come into play, it has become near on untenable for local governments to continue the management and the risk of local bushfire brigades. Decisions made by local governments in the last couple of weeks where they have actually supported the move to advocate for the state government to take over the management of bushfire brigades is not to get rid of local bushfire brigades. It is actually to help maintain them, to make sure that they are still available into the future. Our volunteers deserve to have all of the support that they possibly can have, and it is getting to the point where local governments do not have the ability to provide that support. I am foreshadowing an alternate motion tonight if this motion is lost. The work that WOLGA is doing in this space is to provide an advocacy position for local government across the state, as at this point in the review and the rewrite of 3 pieces of legislation that dictate how our bushfire brigades, our fire brigades and our emergency services operate, we do not have an advocacy position. We are trying to come to a point where we do have a position so that we can have some input into the review and rewrite where they merge 3 acts of legislation into one. It is very easy to sit here and take the populist stand and side with what people want to hear. That is not going to get us anywhere moving forward into the future. The fire events that we are seeing that our volunteers attend are becoming more complex. They are becoming more dangerous. And we need to be able to make sure that our volunteers through that process are as safe as they possibly can in the dangerous job that they do. This Shire has been in this position before, where we went from 9 brigades to 6. And to be quite honest, I do not relish the role that the then president played and had to do as her role in informing brigades that they had to close. This report we have before council this evening does not state anywhere that we would be looking at brigades closing, merging or ceasing to exist. This report is trying to actually make sure that we maintain the brigades that we have, that they are given the funding and the support that they should have and that they deserve so that they can continue to service this community the way that they have for many, many years. It is a very, very complex issue, and when we are dealing with volunteers, it actually becomes a very emotive issue. Somewhere along the line, some of us have to actually stand up and try and take the emotion out of this and see a clear way through legislation to make sure that we are supporting our bushfire volunteer brigades. Thank you. Would anybody else like to speak for this motion?
Madam President, not to speak for or against, but I would like to ask a question or two, if I may.
Yes, councillor Bias.
To the CEO and then most likely through to the director. Councillor Duggan mentioned the importance of listening to our volunteers. Was the position of all the brigades unanimous?
Madam President, I'll ask the Director of Development Services to answer that question.
Thank you for the question, Councillor. Through you, Madam President. I think that the deputation did confirm that one of the 7 brigades wasn't in support of the current position that the deputation recommended, and we've noted that under the community consultation section, also in the report, that one brigade did express their support to be transferred through to DFES.
Thank you, Madam President. Thank you to the director. My next question relates to option 1's alignment with the Walga positions. Could the director perhaps shed some light on that?
Happy to answer that.
Yes, thank you for the question. Through you, Madam President. The draft advocacy position that Walga requested feedback on is stated for everyone's convenience on page 97 of the agenda. Now, accompanying that draft advocacy position was a discussion paper, and within that discussion paper, they identified 4 options, but it was very clear that feedback from the sector is invited. So feedback is not limited to choosing one of 4 options, or is it simply limited to just a position for or against the draft advocacy position identified by Walga? Actually, in the complete opposite, that Walga have really emphasised the importance of having a council resolution from as many of its members as possible. And I think they acknowledge the complexity of this issue. So the recommendation that officers have formed is a unique recommendation, but I think our landscape, our brigades and our volunteers deserve a very unique consideration because it's such an important decision for our Shire.
Perhaps if I can just add to that, Madam President, I just want to echo the comments that you made as well about the respect the officers have for the members of the brigades and the appreciation for the value work that they do. I guess that in echoing the director's comments, we actually, when we sat down and looked through the options that Walga had presented, as officers, didn't really like any of them, to be honest. And we thought that following on from the Ferguson report, that the establishment of a rural fire service was a better approach that Walga should be advocating for, and hence that's what we've recommended to council to consider. I guess I would acknowledge that perhaps if we had more time, or in hindsight, we could have had an extra step and communicated that with the captains of the brigades and done some further consultation around that. However, we already have an extension to the time frame, so we already are out of the time frame that was initially applied. And so I acknowledge that perhaps that could have been an extra step that we could have done, but we thought that if Walga was to advocate for the state for the establishment of a rural fire service, it would be a better position than any of the 4 options that they presented.
And a supplementary, if I may, Madam President, just following on around that point concerning timing. As officers, do you feel confident that you maximise the amount of time, and what are the deadlines that we are working with?
Through you, Madam President, we already have an extension to the time till this Friday. So the deadline, I can't remember the actual date, was the 8th of July. So Walga actually asked for a council resolution on this matter by the 8th of July. We felt that didn't give enough time to consult with the members of the brigades and to bring it to council and without us calling a special council meeting. So we asked for an extension to this Friday, which Walga provided.
So just to be clear, Madam President, we're subject to external deadlines here that Walga have effectively imposed.
We are subject to deadlines outside of our control. I think for everybody's benefit to put some more clarity around the timelines and the reason that we have had to have responses back. Normally with an item like this, Walga do not require a council resolution. Normally they will go to their zones, which we are part of the Peel zone with 4 other local governments, and they will ask for a response from their zone local governments. Given the importance of this issue and this item, Walga did not just want a response from the zones that make up the membership of Walga. They made it very clear that they wanted a council resolution from each council to make sure that the information provided to them had come through the processes from each local government. The timeline is set that the state government is already in the processes of reviewing the 3 pieces of legislation. They have people working very diligently going through those 3 pieces of legislation. I do know that the Bushfire Act has stood since 1954. The Bushfire or the Fire Brigades Act predates that one. So these are very old pieces of legislation that they are dealing with, that they are wanting to see reviewed and merged into one piece of legislation. From tonight, we as a council, through the CEO, need to supply Walga with the outcome of the council's decision here tonight. The officers at Walga will then take the next 2 or so weeks correlating all of the information provided to them through council resolutions from 139 councils around the state. That information will then come back to the Walga zone meetings in the latter half of August and will then go to the state council meeting to be held in the first week of September, so that there can be a advocacy position formed so that Walga can work on behalf of local governments across the state in dealing with the state government on the rewrite and merger of these pieces of legislation.
One more supplementary, if I may. If that's Walga's time frame, has the state government provided a time frame or even just a window to which they're working to reconcile these 3 separate pieces of legislation?
Nothing that they have said in concrete at this point in time. All we know is that they are working on, I think, putting a green paper together, which will come out for public comment very early in 2023. So the time frame is not extensive. It is quite a short period of time.
And one final question, if I may, through to the CEO and most likely the director. My interactions with DFIS are exactly 0. In the deputation, it was noted that DFIS has no appetite for taking brigades who don't wish to go. Can I just get some confirmation that that is DFIS's official position? So even if everyone were to decide without the brigades express desire, then DFIS wouldn't take over effectively.
Through you, Madam President, I guess what I would say in response to that is that the statement in the deputation is correct, and that a number of local governments, when they have considered transferring the brigades across to DFIS, and the most recent one is the City of Wanneroo going through that process, where I understand they've got 6 brigades, and I understand they've had to have a resolution from each brigade that they're happy to transition across. And upon receipt of those, which I've now got, I'm told by the CEO, and upon receipt of that the resolution from each of the 6 brigades, DFIS was then able to consider entering into an MOU with the City of Wanneroo and DFIS about that transition arrangement. That's the way they've managed transition arrangements to date, as I understand. And that can be quite a divisive process, as you can imagine. And that's something that we're not considering. This is about the Shire's position in regard to the Walga advocacy. So I think DFIS is looking for DFIS have said quite clearly they're not interested in taking over brigades that don't want to go to them. But this is more about what Walga might advocate for.
Fully appreciate that. I just wanted to make sure that that was an accurate representation of DFIS's position. So thank you, CEO, and thank you, Madam President.
Is there anybody else that would like to speak for the motion before us? Councillor D'Agostino, would you like to close?
Thank you, Madam President. I appreciate this is a very difficult issue and this isn't a populist issue. I'm looking at this from a practical perspective of what's best for our SJ ratepayers and for our volunteers. I think the previously proposed recommendation is a material and significant change which shouldn't be rushed into, and I strongly advocate we don't just listen, we act on the concerns and the issues outlined by our volunteers. I'm concerned, and I believe the many issues raised by the volunteers in the deputation tonight justified consideration. Walga will go and make their decision, but I think we owe it to our ratepayers and our volunteers, and I recommend this resolution for approval.
Thank you, Councillor D'Agostino. All those in favour of the motion? All those against? Motion is carried 2-4. 4-2.
Madam President, can we please record the votes?
Yes.
And Councillor D'Agostino, can we get a reason for the difference to the officer's recommendation once the minute secretary's done that bit, please?
Mr. CEO, if I was to say something to the effect of to acknowledge and reflect the issues raised in the deputation. To acknowledge and recognise the issues raised in, I'll hold. To acknowledge and recognise the issues raised in the deputation. From the brigades. Well, not all the brigades, whatever the correct description is. Yeah. Well, in the deputation table this evening.
Who hadn't? It is Councillor D'Agostino's position. He's the one that put the motion forward. Item 10.1.1, proposed road naming lot 9001 Bruns Drive, Darling Downs. Can I please have a mover for the motion? Thank you, Councillor Strange. Can I please have a seconder? Thank you, Councillor Atwell. Is there anybody opposed to this motion? Motion is carried unanimously. 10.1.2, proposed road naming lot 1264 1070 Orton Road, Cardup, and lot 86 Cavernous Close, Cardup. Can I please have a mover for this motion? Thank you, Councillor Duggan. Can I please have a seconder? Thank you, Councillor D'Agostino. Is there anybody opposed to this motion? Motion is carried unanimously. Item 10.1.3, dividing fence lot 21 Butcher Road, Darling Downs and lot 21 3 Butcher Road, Darling Downs. Can I please have a mover for this motion? Thank you, Councillor D'Agostino. Can I please have a seconder? Thank you, Councillor Bias. Is there anybody opposed to this motion? Motion is carried unanimously. Item 10.1.4, amendment to condition to extend date which completion of development must be achieved. Use not listed solar farm, incidental tourist facility, office and site facility at lot 1001, 25 Privet Lane, lot 200, 1674 Thomas Road and lot 210 Abernathy Road, Oakford. Can I please have a mover for this motion?
Can I have a question, please, Madam President?
Yes, Councillor.
My question would be, is there not, I know, as I'm quite aware, it's been going on for a long time, very aware of that. Is there any way that we can actually put some sort of a caveat restriction or something like that to say that when from the, you know, a time period, so to speak, because we have a number of these things. This is not the first one that's ever came up and will probably be the last one. So that people do, and I quite agree with the gentleman there, they do need some, what do you call it? Oh, I've lost the word, whatever it is, satisfaction or whatever else. Yeah. So is there any way that we can actually do this to actually push the point a little bit? Because this has been going on, obviously, and we've had others going on for years and years and years and years. So is there any way we can do that? That's what I'd ask you, please, Mr. Director.
Thank you for the question through you, Madam President. We are actually reaching a point of finality with this matter. The actual application deals only with condition 21, and it seeks to make a reference to full completion of development within 2 years. The report actually does state that for the application to remain valid, it has to be substantially commenced by the 7th of December this year. So based on the current state of play, the applicant has to begin the development on or before the 7th of December. And if council supports the modified condition, they'll have 2 years from the date they commence construction to complete the development.
To a degree, that does answer my question, but as I said before, this has been backwards and forwards a few times, supposedly to be done, and still isn't done. So can we forever go on putting it off and putting it on?
Yeah, thank you for the question through the chair. I guess that's part of the challenge of the planning framework. Theoretically, that doesn't stop an applicant seeking to, down the track, further extend the substantial commencement timeframe. We have sort of a number of those matters coming to council on a routine basis. So all we can really do is provide the same statement that each proposal has to be assessed on its merits. So we can't make a position to deny that right to an applicant to substantially or to modify the substantial commencement date. All we note with this one is that the applicant's chosen only to modify one condition and not propose any changes to when they need to achieve substantial commencement, which is, you know, certainly fast approaching.
Thank you.
I've got a question too, if I may, Madam President. So following on from Councillor Atwell's question, the director mentioned that this is the only condition they've sought to change. So effectively they could have asked for a later date of commencement. So they've sort of effectively implicitly recommitted to that December 2022 commencement date. Am I understanding that correctly?
Thank you for the question, Councillor. Through the chair, yes, certainly if the development is not substantially commenced by 7th of December 2022, then the development approval would become invalidated at that point. The most unuseful aspect, though, of the planning framework is that a applicant can actually, after the fact, also seek a extension of a substantial commencement condition, which one might say is quite incredible, but it's a right that is provided for under the planning framework, that such application can be made before or after expiry of the substantial commencement date.
And such a request, and we're reading tea leaves to a degree, but such a request hypothetically would come to council in a similar format as this one.
Yes, that's correct.
One final question, if I may, Madam President. It's related to the earlier point concerning vegetation. So the original approval, condition 9, concerning landscaping and revegetation plans. What framework do the officers use for determining whether a proponent meets that test? Because it is to the Shire's satisfaction. What framework do officers use to test whether it is suitable, and do we have a policy that governs that effectively?
Thank you for the question through the chair. Probably much of the deliberation with applicants occurs around conditions. So condition drafting to state the least has to be done with a real clear intent in mind. So condition 9, well, predated, certainly it's my time here. It does provide some clarity as to what it's seeking to achieve in terms of the screening and privacy of nearby affected residences. It sort of shies away from just a vague concept of screening and privacy, but it really places an emphasis on the amenity of affected nearby residences. So the planning, I guess the planners who would receive that plan would be looking at what the condition requires it to demonstrate, and then assessing whether the condition will achieve those criteria. So we've got within our team an environmental planner. He's got particular skills in that area, and he would assist the non-environmental planners in that task. Of course, council from time to time have also resolved plans to come back to council, even after an approval has been granted. So that's also an option that's available.
Just to be completely clear in my mind, not in relation to this particular item, but just this is a condition that is often placed on applicants. Is it something that would be suitable for a council policy that does define like what suitable privacy screening would entail, or is that getting too prescriptive?
Thank you for the question. On, I guess, first feeling, it would probably sort of shy a little way away from the fact that each site is quite unique. Each situation is quite unique, and so trying to prescribe a position may prevent more effective outcomes. So that would be my initial feeling, but certainly a local planning policy could be developed for any matter of a relevant planning aspect of the local planning scheme. The more that's prescribed, the more that potentially can limit that earlier point around outcomes which are site responsive and the like.
Thank you, Director. Thank you, Madam President.
Motion. Thank you, Councillor Duggan. Can I have a seconder, please? Thank you, Councillor Strange. Is there anybody opposed to this motion? Motion is carried unanimously. Can we please ask Councillor D'Agostino to return to the chamber? Councillor D'Agostino, the officer's recommendation was carried unanimously. Item 10.1.5, Section 31 reconsideration, proposed change of use showroom to health studio, Lot 3, 821 Southwestern Highway, Byford. Can I please have a mover for this motion? Thank you, Councillor Duggan. Can I please have a seconder for this motion? Thank you, Councillor Strange. Is there anybody opposed to this motion? Motion is carried unanimously. Item 10.1.6, proposed additions to educational establishment, new food technology building, addition to administration building and shelters to pick up drop-off area, Lot 102-115 Abernathy Road, Byford. Can I please have a mover for this motion? Thank you, Councillor Duggan. Can Councillor Atwell, happy to second? You second? Sorry. Can I please have a seconder for this motion? Thank you, Councillor Bias. Is there anybody opposed to this motion? The motion is carried unanimously. Item 10.1.7, consideration of proposed scheme amendment prohibiting groundwater extraction for export for commercial use. Can I please have a mover for this motion? Thank you, Councillor Bias. Can I have a seconder, please? Thank you, Councillor Strange. Is there anybody opposed to this motion? Motion is carried unanimously. Item 10.1.8, request for payout of developer contribution credits. Can I please have a mover for this motion? Thank you, Councillor Bias. Councillor Strange, happy to second. Is there anybody opposed to this motion? Motion is carried unanimously. Item 10.1.9, proposed Metropolitan Region Scheme Amendment, West Mundijong. Excuse me, Councillor. West Mundijong Urban Precinct, request for preliminary comment. I have an alternate motion that I wish to put forward, which has been sent out to councillors this afternoon. Can I please have a seconder to the alternate motion, which has a change to condition 2 to read, considers its position on the proposed Metropolitan Region Scheme Amendment, West Mundijong Urban Precinct, once Part 1 is completed by the WAPC. Can I please have a seconder for this motion? Thank you, Councillor Strange. Is there anybody opposed to this
Madam President, could I ask a question? Would you consider the deletion of paragraphs D and E?
No. Is there anybody opposed to this motion? Thank you, Councillor.
I just had a question, that was all. Ready? Now, just my question is that in here somewhere, are we able to implant the importance of this piece of land? Is a very prime piece of agricultural land. Considering that we have a considerable amount of urban land already, approved within the Shire, is there any way that we could lend some argument to the fact that we, well, myself personally, but the council, whether the council would consider that we maybe try and retain our urban land, our rural land as long as we can, by not actually supporting, well, what I mean by not that, but not actually supporting, but actually by bringing it to the attention of the authorities that we don't believe that this is ready for development as of yet. And also my other point is that, like, this is, as I said, it's a prime piece of real estate, of farming land. It abuts a feedlot. I don't know whether we can also let them know that. It is west of the West Mudijong industrial area, which in the prevailing winds, we've already had this problem in Carter with the prevailing winds blowing whatever might come from West Mudijong over a new subdivision. So I know that's a bit complicated, but is there any way we can get to dealing with that sort of thing?
Thank you for the question. I guess what it would be doing is presupposing the potential outcomes of that regional planning exercise. Certainly, we've listed parts A to F in terms of key issues, as officers have looked at them to be. There isn't a specific issue as to the question of agricultural viable land impacts at this moment in time.
Or Councillor Atwell, you know, you could foreshadow option 2, which is not supported, and provide some reasons for that, which could be the primacy of the industrial area, the proximity to the West Mudijong industrial area, and the proximity to the feedlot. That choice is yours.
As the mover, I'm happy to speak to the officer's recommendation with the alternate item 2. I don't believe that council is in a position that it can say that it supports anything when it actually doesn't know what the outcome of any of those planning investigations would be. Councillor Strange, would you like to speak or reserve?
I'll reserve, thanks.
Councillor D'Agostino.
Thanks, Madam President, and I welcome Councillor Atwell's change. I think that'll be a good discussion. I've got a number of concerns with the proposal. We've just completed our review of the planning strategy after many years, and now LPS 3 is relevant. And here we are, we're saying, subject to some changes or conditions, that we support a material change. We considered this exact block of land, or this group of land holdings, not long ago in November 2020 in our council meeting, and we wrote to the Minister, and the Minister's response was very clear. She said, the subject land is rural under MRS and Perth and Peel. Any significant departure from that status would be best considered as part of the framework review expected to commence in 2021, and surely that will happen in due course. And I think, you know, in item 10.1.4, there's some wording on page 43, it's noted, in that case, the subject site is identified as rural and land under the LPS, and the LPS generally seeks to protect larger rural lots for agriculture. This area is prime agricultural land with larger rural lots, and here we are recommending to support the urbanisation of it. Interestingly, I think there's a very limited discussion on the agricultural capability of the land in this item, because it is quite capable agricultural land. Now, I suppose I have a number of concerns, particularly with paragraph D. To me, it looks like we're trading off the card-up area, and I understand all the concerns with the card-up investigation area. I think they're all meritorious, and you know, I believe we should be fighting against what's been proposed by the planning investigation area. Have no problem with that. I just think the way we've pitched this, which is effectively we'll trade up this if you agree to that, doesn't work, and I don't think it's something I want to stand for. I don't think we as a council should be standing for. So I have a real problem with paragraph D. Paragraph E, about the industrial area expansion, you know, directly impacts on the West Mundijong industrial area. I think what Councillor Atwell says about, potential pollution, all the rest of it, there's so many potential issues there that haven't been thoroughly worked through. So in summary, we've spent many years developing LPS3. We've consulted, we've debated, we've waited, and now we're ready and we're there. And here we are using the words we support in the officer's recommendation. I appreciate, Madam President, it's different, but saying we support a major change. So I'm on that basis concerned, and look forward to an alternate motion.
Thank you, Councillor D'Agostino. Is anybody else would like to speak for the motion? As the mover, I'm happy to take this item straight to the vote. All those in favour of this item? All those against? Casting vote, motion is carried.
Madam President, can we get a reason for the, you got a reason for the difference there to the officer's recommendation? Yep.
Item 10.2, Infrastructure Services Reports. 10.2.1, Minutes of the Rivers Regional Council meeting held on the 16th of June 2022. Can I please have a mover for this motion? Councillor Atwell, you.
Oh, yeah. Sorry.
Councillor Byche, you happy to second? Is anybody opposed to this motion? Motion is carried unanimously. Item 10.2.2, Procurement Arrangement for Natural Resource Management Services. Can I please have a mover for this motion? Thank you, Councillor Byers. Can I please have a seconder? Thank you, Councillor Atwell. Is anybody opposed to this motion? Motion is carried unanimously. Item 10.3, Corporate Services Reports. 10.3.1, Confirmation of Payment of Creditors, June 2022. Can I please have a mover for this motion? Thank you, Councillor Strange. Councillor Byers, you happy to second? Is there anybody opposed to this motion? Motion is carried unanimously. Item 10.3.2, Monthly Financial Report, May 2022. Can I please have a mover for this motion? Thank you, Councillor Byers. Can I have a seconder, please? Councillor Atwell. Thank you. Is there anybody opposed to this motion? Motion is carried unanimously. Item 10.3.3, Council Policy, Councillor Training and Continuing Professional Development Policy Review. Can I please have a mover for this motion? Thank you, Councillor Byers. Can I have a seconder, please? Thank you, Councillor Duggan. Is there anybody opposed to this motion? Motion is carried unanimously. Item 10.4, Community and Organisational Development Reports. 10.4.1, Access and Inclusion Advisory Group Community Vacancy Appointment. Can I please have somebody move to appoint from the confidential attachment number 2?
Madam President, rather than names, could I suggest that we do applicant numbers?
That's
there?
fine.
If council wants to discuss names, the council go behind closed doors. I would suggest to do that.
Numbers are fine. Is there any councillor would wish to move?
Sorry, Madam President, which number applicant are we looking to move?
Which one would you like?
Oh, I move applicant 1, please.
Thank you. Are you happy to endorse the remaining nominations received and approve these applicants be appointed to any further community member vacancies as per condition 2?
Yes, Madam President.
Thank you.
Applicant 2 and then applicant 3. You happy with that, Councillor Duggan?
That's correct, thanks.
Ten 10.4.2 Local Emergency Management Committee Information Report. Can I please have a mover for this motion? Thank you, Councillor Bias. Can I have a seconder, please? Thank you, Councillor Strange. Is there anybody opposed to this motion? Motion is carried unanimously. Item 10.4.3, Serpentine Jarrahdale Equine Trails Master Plan, final adoption. Can I please have a mover for this motion? Thank you, Councillor Duggan. Can I have a seconder, please? Thank you, Councillor Atwell. Is there anybody opposed to this motion? Motion is carried unanimously. Item 10.4.4, Draft Equine Facilities Master Plan for public comment. Can I please have a mover for this motion? Thank you, Councillor Duggan. Can I please have a seconder for this motion? Thank you, Councillor Bias. Is there anybody opposed to this motion? Motion is carried unanimously.
Madam President, I've declared a financial interest in the next item, so I'm going to leave the room.
Thank you. Item 10.4.5, consideration of rescheduling the CEO Employment Committee meeting from the 1st of August 2022 to the 8th of August 2022. Can I please have a mover for this motion? Thank you, Councillor Duggan. Can I have a seconder, please? Thank you, Councillor Bias. Is there anybody opposed to this motion? Motion is carried unanimously. Mr. Martin, the officer's recommendation was carried unanimously. Item 10.5, Executive Services Reports. 10.5.1, Walga AGM 2022, appointment of delegates and consideration of motions.
Madam President, I have received a written nomination from Councillor Strange and yourself to be the voting delegates at the Walga Annual General Meeting prior to the meeting.
Thank you. Do we have any nominations for the voting proxy delegates? Thank you, Councillor Atwell. Do we have another? Councillor Duggan, thank you. Would somebody please like to move the motion with the nominations being Councillor Strange and Councillor Richards, the voting delegates, and Councillor Atwell and Councillor Duggan as their respective proxy voting delegates? Thank you, Councillor Bias. Can I have a seconder, please? Councillor Atwell, thank you. Is anybody opposed to this motion? Motion is carried unanimously. Item 10.6 is confidential reports, of which there is nil. Item 11 is urgent business. 11.1 is urgent business, invalidity complaint determination regarding costs. Can I please have a mover for the motion? Thank you, councillor Bias. Can I have a seconder, please? Thank you, councillor Atwell. Is there anybody opposed to this motion? Motion is carried unanimously. Item 10.2, consideration of appointment of the Western Australian Electoral Commissioner as being responsible for the conduct of the fresh election in the North West Ward as a voting in-person election. Can I please have a mover for the motion? Councillor Atwell, thank you. Can I have a seconder, please? Thank you, councillor Bias. Is there anybody opposed to this motion? Motion is carried unanimously. Item 12 is councillor questions, of which notice has been given, of which there is nil. Item 13 is closure, and I declare this meeting closed at 8:55 p.m. Thank you, everybody, for your attendance this evening.